What is going on, everybody? Garrett Browne from Channel Program. This is another day of demo days. I'm excited. For one, it's Friday, and the weather is no longer hot with mosquitoes in the forecast. So I like it. And so for today's demo days, I want to introduce everybody to David Rihak. David, how you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, good, good. David
Pretty
is
good, pretty
the
good.
Yeah. well, David is the founder of Peg, and it's very interesting because there's going to be today's world, 2024, a lot of remote, a lot of authentication, a lot of workspace stuff that we have to consider as an MSP. Things are changing, so I'm really interested in what you guys are doing, and I really want to see this. Could you I'll just kind of give it over to you. Tell us about
Yeah,
yourself and PEG and what you guys are doing.
sure. Thanks, man. Well, it's good to
Yeah,
be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah,
Um,
man.
I'm the founder, as you said. I'm the founder of Peig. We are a what you would normally traditionally call, I guess, a passwordless access security company. Um,
Mm-hmm.
our whole thing is we help MSPs and SMBs build robust ecosystems from the point of their cybersecurity strategy. And we basically do it through, um, using our product. Really, is this thing we call a workspace browser. It's I guess it's sort of a new and different way of approaching access security to make sure we actually solve some of the new challenges that are kind of arising with the way things are changing, right? Because the
Yeah.
game's always it's the vendors and the industry does something, and then the adversaries kind of adapt and use new tools and get better at things, and so it's that's how it is, and so that's sort of where we are, and what we're doing is really get making sure that from the access security point of view we can really build a robust framework for companies and help them mitigate some of those risks.
Man, that is the buzzword, the security aspect. Because, uh, man, I wake up every day and then you're like, oh wait, that's happening, and so yeah, man, I'm very interested to see what you guys are doing because that is something that is just going to become a bigger focus, especially as threats evolve and the approach to this sort of security management evolves too.
Yeah.
Some things are getting outdated and new things are coming in, like you guys. So, um, yeah, yeah. So, do you want me to share a screen, or what would you like me to start with?
No, I think I'll just sort of go ahead and maybe do my thing. What I'd like to start with is maybe tell a bit about the company, um, tell a bit about me, and then kind of go into a bit of the detail of what like access security actually means. You can talk about like these big words like risks and threats and all that, but I think it's important that people actually understand what that means. And
Mm-hmm.
and not just from a perspective of like, okay, so this is a big problem, but like looking at the size of the problem and looking at the technicalities of the problem, right? Like what that actually means, what it actually means in practice. And then also, of course, this is demo day, so I want to
Yeah.
go into showing you guys what Pig is and how we try to address those problems. I think we do a pretty good job, but that's up to everyone else to uh, assess, right? So
Yeah.
um, so as I said, we are an MSP focused vendor. We work with MSPs and MSSPs in both the US and the EU. We are a Pittsburgh-based company, by the way.
You're a what
Um,
based company?
a Pittsburgh-based company.
Okay. All right.
Yep, yep. And and yeah, and so I guess the one thing, working with MSPs, I guess a really important aspect for us is um, just really focusing on uh, we're having a really good support system, making sure that our partners really learn about the product, and
Mm-hmm.
not just from our documentation, and making sure we actually walk them through the process, because this is there's a lot of different technologies out here. not to name names, but Microsoft sometimes make things a bit difficult, right? There's like 1,000 ways to misconfigure that. So, so it's really important for us to make sure we actually do a good job with our partners to make sure they feel comfortable, and yeah, and so that's sort of what we're about at Peig.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It is one of those things where, like, there's intro ID, there's a lot of stuff, but that's, and I know there's a lot of people out there that probably agree with this, but like, it's cumbersome, like, to get that set up, get it right. Is it updating? And it takes time. So this is the, I'm looking at, look at you guys' site, and it just, I'm already like, okay, it feels good. It's smooth. I'm like, I feel like you guys already handle a lot of that, like you said, the misconfigurations. Thought you got it set up, but later go back like, wait, what? It's just something, whatever.
Yeah,
something stupid.
I mean, that's
that Microsoft.
I think I think that's a big thing. Really going for sort of the security by default design principle. I think that's also like a big topic for us in terms of our product management and thinking about how we decided to build the product the way we did, and really making it easy because for MSPs it's a lot of work, right? They gotta handle a lot of different clients. The last thing they need is things to have to another problem to have to juggle, right? And that's the same thing goes for SMBs, right? Like that's just they don't have the budgets, they can't really afford to. They need something simple. I think that's why. By the way, I think that's why just like looking at these big names, I guess Microsoft, Google. I think that's why Google Workspace is working so well for a lot of companies because from their perspective, it's like, okay, we don't actually have to do much, right? Like we feel like we don't have to do much. It's a very simple tool to use. So.
Yeah, it's sign-ins, things like that. For everybody across the board, that's always an issue. It's not always an issue, but it could be something where hey, this isn't working. It could be, and so it's kind of one of those things where it's not always the easiest, smoothest process, especially with the onboarding. And say, all right, this is how this works. And so, yeah, I think especially the authentication evolves, like what you guys are doing, I'm saying is absolutely what needs to be happening. And I wish things were easier. So, yeah, man, this is, I'm looking forward to the demo and, see what you guys are, gonna have for MSPs, because MSPs, man, we will go into all sorts of environments, and every client will hear, oh, okay, well, this MSP, they're going to do this for us. This MSP can keep everything the same. We don't want them to touch anything, but how do you provide that more modernized security? Because without interrupting their workflow, So yeah.
All right. So let's get into it. So can I share over here?
Yeah.
Sorry. Do entire screen here. Okay, got it. Okay, cool. So
here we go.
Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about.
If you want, just you can hide that bar at the bottom that's shown.
Oh, right. Yeah, got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. There you go. All right.
Okay, got it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about something we call a device-bound access security model. This is sort of an approach that I believe is a really important approach going forward, thinking about fundamental building blocks of cybersecurity strategies for MSPs and for SMBs and even larger organizations, of course. I talked a bit about myself. I've been in the digital identity space for about 9 years now. My background is I've been working on bigger government projects and building identity systems architectures where you need high levels of assurance, basically according to standardizations and stuff like that. But this is more about Peig. I want to make sure we can sort of help people understand what we're about. I talked a bit about our support. Exceptional support really is important for MSPs. The way we do it is we actually use we believe in sort of like a practice hands-on approach, and we do a sort of a driver navigator model with our partners, where for the first 5 deployments, what we do is we actually are there with them to make sure that they actually learn using the tool really well in practice, that it's not just theory that they have to sort of take and then use themselves. And it's proven to be quite a good approach, because this way our partners really they can ask questions real time on real systems. We can help them with planning the deployments out and addressing some of the project risks and stuff like that. It's just a really good way to just learn through practice and having sort of a mentor who knows what they're doing with the partners as a way to learn, right?
If you don't mind me jumping in here, I love you're starting with this, because, man, I can't even tell you how many times MSPs have just been burned by companies who have like almost no support. And this is something that I love you starting with this, because it's like, we know you have a product, we know you have a good solution, whatever, but it's the support of like when you're in the trenches and when it's happening. That's what matters. And the other thing too, just for everybody who's watching, as David is going through this is live streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube. Feel free to leave a comment or ask David a question. We might pull it up, or if after the fact, after it's recorded, you can always just drop a comment to connect with David and his team after the fact. So have at it. All right, I'll get back over to you, Dave. But I love you starting with this support thing, because that is so important. It really is.
Right. Thanks, man. But I said I'm going to talk a bit more about the cybersecurity aspect of things. Cybersecurity is about managing risk at the end of the day. Managing risk is always about prioritization. It's about focusing on maybe understanding risk, right, and being able to address the risks that are important, basically, for the organization. Now, this may seem like obvious to some people that have been in the cybersecurity space for a long time, but I do feel, and in my experience, it's one thing to know and the other thing to practice. There are lots of vulnerabilities out there, right? This number is, to be honest with you, it's probably bigger right by now, but this is from the National Vulnerability Database of the US. And it just tells you there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of threats out there, there's a lot of vulnerabilities, and a lot of ways companies can be attacked by adversaries and potentially led to a breach, let's say. But it also says that how important it is to prioritize, right? It's not practically manageable to actually address all 200,000 vulnerabilities that are out there, and so this is really getting back to the idea of risk management and thinking about, okay, so really being diligent with seeing cybersecurity as a risk function. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I'm sort of focusing on this topic, is there's a lot of forces that are, I think, leading companies to be like, let's say one really good example is compliance and insurance policies that are sort of strictly defining what's the right way of doing things, right? What's sort of the standard way of doing things. The problem with the standard ways of doing things is you're basically not reflecting the current security challenges and the current threats, but you're looking in the past, and you'll building models that have been created for something that happened in the past, which may be quite outdated, right? And as a matter of fact, I really like a data-driven approach to sort of take the lead here. And I think the Verizon's data breach report is a good way to look at what's actually going on. because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of companies and a lot of breaches that have been recorded by Verizon, and it shows quite a bit about what's actually going on.
Yeah.
I do want to, before I get in, jump into the topic of credentials, I do want to just zoom in on one topic, and that's ransomware here. Ransomware has risen in the past, I think, six years or something like that, from about 1 or 2% of all breaches to about 24. And I think that just tells you exactly how quickly things can change and how quickly priorities can change, right? When thinking about how you manage your risk, your cyber risk, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the important part of it is, if you look at this whole topic, then and look at the what the data is showing us, use of stolen credentials as a way, as a function, and as a vector that adversaries use to maybe start or even and execute successful breaches, is really the thing that happens, that is present in the largest number of attacks, actually. In fact, it's about 49% of the attacks from last year that have of the breaches, sorry, not attacks, of the breaches that happened last year that saw a use of stolen credentials being a method that needed to be used at some point to actually be able to execute the breach, right? So looking at the technical side of this, and it's the question of, okay, so what's actually going on, right? It's like, these are like nice numbers that we can throw around, but it's really important to actually understand what's happening technically, because these are from a large extent technical problems. And so what I want to do here is kind of tell a few technical stories to make sure we understand, okay, so what's actually happening here. First of all, I think it's important to understand, for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to use the word credentials with in caps here.
Okay.
To not just talk about credentials as we usually understand them, which is typically like username and password, and maybe like some additional step-up authentication thing, like an MFA or something to improve this. That's sort of what we typically understand by credentials, right? But I want to make sure we actually don't forget the what's actually going on technically, which is application cookies. Whenever users access web resources, your Outlook or your Gmail or whatever, right? The way it's done is that there's always a credential present at first, but then what actually gives you the access is the application cookie, right? There's a session that's established between the web browser or the device, right, and the target service, and that thing that actually holds the session are application cookies. And what happens is, and what adversaries are really after, are these ways to get these application cookies, right? And the reason why I'm talking about this is the second point here, which is malware, right? That's an important threat way that adversaries get hold of credentials. If sometimes you have passwords stored on the device, but a lot of the times you just have those application cookies, and that's actually what adversaries are after, because that's what they can use to actually get remote access to your email account or whatever instead of you, and then do damage there, right?
Yeah.
Reuse of passwords or credentials, that's a big topic, of course, still. Unfortunately, that's just the way things are. Like, people will use your MS365 or your Google Workspace credentials on other websites, and there's really nothing you can do about it. There's no way to enforce them not doing it, right? They will very likely, if you're an SMB, right, they will very likely access from unmanaged devices, just because that's just what they want from a business perspective, right? Like, they don't, when they're small businesses, they're usually in a culture where people bring in their own devices. They will, even economically, that's something that some companies will look at, like, oh, this is actually nice. Like, we don't have to buy people devices or something like that, right? And by the way, they just want to use a Mac, for example. They don't want to be on a Windows computer. So this is just the reality of things, right? And then, of course, just if we combine these last two things, you'll see that people actually reuse credentials, or they store those reused credentials on their devices. So like you basically I use the same credential that I use for Google, and then what I do is I just store that credential on my device, and then whole and behold, your company is exposed. And of course, like the way it's used, I already talked about this, is account takeover. I'm sure like a lot of MSPs have probably been through this the last year or two. Someone in one of their clients just sort of had their email taken over, and just suddenly started sending emails to other people, for example, right? That's a thing that happens quite a lot, and sometimes it's more serious, sometimes it's less serious, but that's really what hackers are after. And of course, your typical social engineering and phishing and MFA bypass type of situations that are used. And all of this really is what represents that number, 49% of access, because this is how adversaries get access to systems, and this is how they then use that access to maybe move laterally and then deploy things like some malicious software that will eventually encrypt all your data and cause your company to basically be at a halt, right? And so what we want to get to, maybe Garrett, if I'm going too slow, let me know, because I'm really like passionate about this, and I feel like maybe I'm going in a bit too much detail, but I think it's important to understand how this stuff works. And for MSPs, they're professionals. I think it's sort of a good thing to know.
No, well, that's the whole point. I love this stuff because this point too is I want to know the technical aspects, because yeah, there's a lot of trust here, there's a lot of support. So it's good to see you diving into this. So yeah, no problem at all with that, bro.
Cool. Okay, so this here is basically the model that when I talk about a device-based or device-bound access security model, this is sort of what it should look like roughly. You have people. The reality is, you have people that have their devices. Sometimes they are managed devices. Sometimes they're not. Right? It's usually a mix of the two. What this picture might look like to someone who's managing devices is like a typical managed device scenario, right? But the thing is, managing devices is not the same thing as managing access, right? Especially in an environment where you're managing more and more services that are cloud or as a service, you basically end up being in a situation where and in a situation where you have people coming in with their own devices, whether it's contractors or just your employees, and based on your policy, you really come to find that your managed devices capability doesn't actually overlap enough of the security problem to be effective to actually make sure you protect your resources well, right? And so what the device-bound security model should look like, and this is sort of what the picture is saying, is you always have authorized devices, no matter if they're BYOD or managed devices. And on those devices, you have mechanisms to make sure that you can really only access from those devices, independently of how deep into those devices you can actually get from a technical point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Garrett?
It does. Kind of make me look at this a little different, but yeah, I like this. Yeah.
So, what finally getting to Peig and getting to show you the demo, which is, I guess, the point of this is, introducing this workspace browser concept.
Yeah.
It's basically what Peig is. Peig is a workspace browser that is device-based. In doing so, it addresses some of the fundamental access threats, and also sort of as a nice add-on from an admin point of view. There isn't a password policy to be managed, maintained, and enforced, or MFA fatigue, and sort of the trade-off between annoying users with too many MFA requests, and then on the other hand, sort of succumb into the requests of business and saying like, okay, well, we're not gonna bother you with this too much, so we're gonna tone it down and have you do an MFA like once every 2 weeks or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll maybe get back to that slide at the end, maybe. I think what I'll do is I'll just show you what I'm talking about. Has all been very theoretical, and I think it's good to actually see what I'm talking about, and let me explain everything in practice
Okay.
using Peig, if you don't mind. Okay, so this is Peig.
This is the browser. This is Peig the browser.
Yeah, this is Peig the browser.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is Peig the browser. It's really like a regular browser. There's nothing special about it from perspective of like it being a browser.
Yeah.
I think the only thing. Sorry, let me just change. I gotta jump here. The only thing, the one key thing that is different about it is the way it actually is used to access resources, because it's not actually just a browser. It's a browser that has one core component to it, which is a device-bound cryptography engine, which basically does two things. The first thing it does is it creates, manages, and stores cryptography securely on a device, so that it can be used for authenticating that the user is actually accessing from this device, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing it does is it actually uses that cryptography in a way that cannot be easily manipulated on a network level, right? I think this is a really important point, because if you think about phishing attacks, for example, right? Phishing attacks, the way they actually work is it is a network attack, it is a man-in-the-middle attack, and the reason why they work is because there is it is possible architecturally to basically create a scenario where a user is tricked into believing that a website that's fake is actually real, and somehow starting the request that way, and then because of that they provide something that actually gives attackers or hackers a cookie that they actually need to be able to do bad things, right? um, so this is actually what Peig does, and the way it does it is quite simple. I guess you basically have your workspace. These are the applications that this particular demo company has in their workspace.
Mm-hmm.
And when I access resources, I basically just click on icons, and what Peig does in the background that you don't see is it does a very sophisticated handshake, and it lets me access this my Google my Gmail account, basically that's in the Google workspace. Without me being exposed to a phishing attack, for example. I wouldn't actually be able, like, if someone tried to send me a phishing attack, it wouldn't work. They wouldn't be able to do any of that. If I accidentally downloaded some malware on my device, that would go after my credentials or my cookies, it wouldn't work, because the cookies aren't actually stored. The reason why is when I close this thing and I re-authenticate, the whole process actually happens again. It's not hard, right? It's because it's invisible, because it's in the background. I'm not bothered by it happening like 100 times a day, right? But it's very robust, right?
Quick question: the cryptography. What's the method? What's your algorithm? Is it AES, or you just depending on the machine, or what is? If you don't mind me asking, what is that?
Yeah. So basically, okay. So there's like two layers to this, I guess. This is like very technical, but there's two layers to this. The first layer is the actual cryptography use, right? What we're using here now is actually elliptic curves.
Okay.
That's just sort of the cryptography that's used. A big topic these days is quantum resistant cryptography, right? A very important topic, and because of that leads me to the second layer, which is actually the protocol that's being used. And this is actually a protocol that's coming from our own lab. It's a protocol that we designed called a universal authentication protocol. And the reason why it's called the universal authentication protocol is because it's actually agnostic of what type of cryptography is being used. It can actually use other forms of cryptographical methods. And the reason why that's important is, quantum computing and everything being such a huge topic, when it's actually, when we have new methods, we actually recently have some new methods that have been published for how to do quantum resistant cryptography. But it's not really, it's sometimes when it comes to these protocols and authentication, it's sometimes really hard to change from one cryptography method to another. And so that's what we're going for with this universal authentication protocol, is to make sure that we can change and adapt really easily and without users having to notice anything.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was wondering, because the whole quantum, the classical encryption with the quantum, so it's becoming a bigger thing. So it's fascinating that you guys are doing that. So I haven't heard a lot of people taking that sort of approach. I like that, because I've been looking around for the post quantum kind of thing. Like the salting and all that. But okay, cool. I just wanted to ask about that, but you could take it back.
Yeah, cool. The other thing I did want to mention is, I talked a lot about, credentials and cookies when I in some of the slides that I showed. And the reason why I mentioned that, and the reason why how this is relevant to the way access security needs to be done, is actually very much tied to the user experience. I just showed you that I'm sort of like re-authenticating every time I basically log into the service, right? Now, what this allows me is to do checks that it's still the same device and still the same user very quickly, very often. But what it also allows me is to not have to store cookies on the device for a long time, which is very important, because that's actually a big way, or very easy way cookies can be exploited to get access to services. Is they're just sitting there on the device, being stored somewhere in the file system, and that's basically sort of what the malware that you download from a website or something like that, what it goes for, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's I guess that's one part of.
Is this Chromium based, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, this is Chromium based. Yeah, this is just like any other browser, really.
How would if you don't mind me asking at this point, what extensions do you allow or can the admin allow for extensions from Chrome Store, Edge, things like that, or how does that?
No, we don't actually allow that in Peig itself. You can use Peig to. I can't do it now. Sorry, because we are streaming there. But we are. You can actually use the device-bound aspect to access stuff in another browser. It will be. So if there are specific scenarios where you need specific extensions, you can still use it in other browsers. But it also depends on what type of resources you have. If we're talking about private cloud applications, for example, which is one way, one situation that's also quite common for businesses to have. Then in that situation, for example, you would basically need to go through Peig. That situation is quite okay, because there's usually aren't a lot of too sophisticated extensions used in those scenarios. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
What I'd like to do next is to get a better understanding and maybe from the user perspective, to see how devices are actually managed and used. One important aspect of this is enrolling new devices, right? So what I want to do actually is, sorry, I want to stop sharing here. Stop screen. Okay. What I want to do is, I want to ask you if you could maybe pull up the video that I sent you before.
Yeah. Here we go.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so what we have here basically are two devices that have Peig installed on it. One of the devices, as you can see, has already been enrolled, has already been
Yeah.
authorized to be able to access
Mm-hmm.
resources in a company and has been some access rights to be able to access those resources. We're going to take a
Yeah.
look at how that works later. The other one,
Mm-hmm.
the other one it hasn't. And so what we're going to look at is how you actually enroll new devices as a user. And this is important from two perspectives. Looking at this from two perspectives. One is what's actually going on from a user perspective, like how hard is it to actually do this, right? The other one is what's actually going on technically. How is this actually made so that it's secure? And so what we're seeing now is that a user basically initiates a pairing session, which is used to create a room where the two devices basically meet. So that's sort of like that's loading now. What actually happened is that the new device has created new cryptography that's going to be used and stored only on that device without it ever leaving it, to be able to use that to actually identify itself later on when the user accesses stuff from the new device, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
when this session was when this new when this meeting room is created, we get these funny little icons,
Yeah.
which is it's not just for sort of like mentally practicing whether the user is actually able to copy a few symbols, but what's actually happening is underneath these symbols there's cryptographical um, um, values basically that have been generated just for the purpose of this specific meeting room for this specific instance, so that a user can pair the meeting, so the user can pair the two devices, end up having a secure way to basically sync uh, their devices so that they can access from one from a new device quite seamlessly, right? So
Interesting.
you
Huh.
so they're just typing the icons. They get another icon that they need to verify from the original device to actually make sure it's actually uh, the user actually intends to sync up this new device. And once they
Mm-hmm.
confirm, the whole thing is basically done, right? I'm not sure
That's fascinating.
if you use Apple TV, but there's sort of a similar process when you're uh, joining, sharing your screen or something like that. It's somewhat of a similar process. The big difference
Mm-hmm.
here is that you're doing this online on the internet, right? Like you don't have to be behind a firewall. You don't have to be on a local network or anything like that. There's no need to do it like that. This is really all just online, but it's still secure.
So, but and that's on a uh, excuse me. So Peg is available for like iPhones and Androids, or what about
Yep,
tablets? Okay.
yep. Anything that's running iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac OS is basically good to go.
We David, we have a question. I'm going to bring it up from Jamie Greenwood. It says, "Hey guys, it's very interesting so far. I'm wondering in terms of access, what makes Peg better than just 2FA?" I was just seeing a bunch of stuff, but let me bring it up. But do you want to, Jamie? Are you gonna say
Yeah,
that?
sure. So I guess it's some of the stuff that I've been talking about. I guess thinking about things like social engineering, phishing, credential theft from devices, application cookie theft from devices, or any way on a network. This is stuff that like MFA, standard 2FA doesn't actually protect you from. Like there's no way that you'll be protected from it with a 2FA, because that's just not. I think honestly, in my opinion, 2FA is something that it was good at the time because it was a way to make things a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But it's quite easy to change the attacks because they're architecturally the same, and just sort of like tweak them, improve them, change strategy, and just continue doing what you were doing before.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and Jamie, thanks for the question. Feel free to ask something else, and anybody else out there. So, yeah, that was really fascinating about the cryptographic values adding up to something. So that's fascinating. So,
So
what?
I guess
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you were gonna. I want to jump in.
No, I was gonna say, what let's just say I'm coming in, I'm an MSP, and I have a client. I have a hardened version of like Edge or Chrome. What is, we talked about onboarding, earlier, kind of, let's say that support. What does that look like for me? Or I go to my client and say, listen, we're going to use this secure browser. They've seen it. They're like, oh, interesting. What does that look like for me of all their favorites, things like that, moving over, the bookmarks, things like that? How do you guys work with
So
that?
frankly, the way we've been like looking at that so far is if there are some we haven't really focused on moving the user from the point of view of favorites and bookmarks. There's
Mm-hmm.
two reasons really. I think one reason is it's not to say that when you start using Peig, you have to stop using other browsers. It's to say
Yeah,
it's like the Peig is really a workspace browser. It's really the point of it
yeah,
is you're using your applications, your work stuff, and you use Peig for that, right? And then the other stuff, which is typically where people actually have those bookmarks and stuff like that, is typically so that's one thing. The other thing is, as I said before, like if there's some um, um, let's say um, there's some users that are really just sort of stuck on like using the browser they used to use before, and if the
yeah.
company can't sort of get them to say, you know what, like this is a security policy and this is like way more important to us, then then in that situation there's the direct link signing, which is basically just saying, okay, I want to log into this, and I do a direct signing, and it's also quite seamless, and it doesn't really disrupt the way you'd use that service.
All right. Thank you. Because that's the thing where, when I'm talking to the client, say, hey,
Mhm.
here's what we could do. And, they're going to ask that kind of stuff. So that's a really good way to approach it. This is the workspace browser. It's like that distinguishment, because
Mhm.
that's basically telling the client, hey, we're not going to interrupt you, but we're going to move some things in a way where it's more secure, but you can still continue to do what you were doing. But you have, okay, I like that. Yeah, that's a good way,
Yeah.
because I was thinking, like, how do I explain this to a client with, do I have to move my stuff? So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Uh,
So I think for a lot of MSPs, it's really about what can I do, like what does this look like from an admin perspective, right? Like what do I
mhm.
do? How do I work with this thing? So I think
Yeah,
that's really the next thing that I would like to take a look at
yeah,
is
man.
taking a look at what Pega looks like for admins. Um, so I'm an admin. I have access to not just my sort of web services but I also have access to a couple of tools that I
Mm,
need to use to be able to actually manage workspaces, big workspaces.
yeah,
One of them is this simple application called users and access,
yeah.
and um, the really important piece here is it's basically a very simple access management environment where I have um, services that I given users access to. I manage their access rights. I manage their roles, and importantly, I also manage the devices that they access um, these services from. Right. So,
Hmm.
um, as an admin, I can pretty much based on the policy that I have, decide, you know what, I'm gonna let this user access from this device, and I'm not gonna let this user from this device. And I have
Yeah.
full control over what's happening. First of
Hmm.
all, I can always revoke access from a particular device if there's a situation that I have, maybe based on some external, warnings or something like that. That are signaled from one of my other systems that I'm using when managing cybersecurity. Um,
Hmm.
but importantly, I'm actually it's the other aspect of this is I'm actually seeing the devices that my users are accessing from, and I've got very good reliability of the fact that they're really only accessing from these devices, and they're accessing in a way that is very it's not really threatening to my resources and to my organization, because the way they're doing it is they're not actually letting the hacker sort of misuse that remote access in a way that would be problematic for me later at some point, right? So a simple scenario, I might say, there's a user. I don't want for like this, there's some demo access rights, but I don't want David to access like Salesforce here anymore, right? So I just revoke access to Salesforce. Right now, I don't have another device except for my OS 6, but if I did, I would just sort of suspend the device for time being, or totally remove it or something like that. That's a big simple thing that you can do. This is really for SMBs that need to have really robust, really simple ways to do very powerful decisions, right? So that's why the console is quite simple. It's not like a huge tool that you'd need too much time to actually learn how to use. But it's a quite simple user interface that works quite well for SMBs.
Oh yeah. So like if you were to click on that device, does it? What would I see if I?
So this one actually nothing happens, because it's me. I can't cut myself off because it's a device-based access.
Yeah. Right? We don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that. But let's say I look at this other user, John Green, right? So right now, we have we use like 2 Windows computers. So right now I just sort of click on this button, and that's it. Like basically, John's he's not able to access his from his Windows anymore. The way that would look is he would just basically get a blank page here saying like he's been suspended, but he would still be able to do that from his other devices, like without any disruptions, right? So those are situations when John loses a device, or for whatever reason you have a change in policy and you decide, you know what, I don't want this person with accessing with this device anymore. It just seems risky for whatever reason, and that's just the way. Or maybe if they're not going to be using it for some time. There's different situations that happen, and there's just a really easy way to manage it. And I think the really important part to this is it's not about managing devices; it's about managing access on devices. So these could all be John's devices. None of these devices would have to be managed in the domain, right? Like that's just not a requirement for the access to be quite very robust, and for the resource of company resources to not be exposed from an access security perspective.
Okay, so I like this because super simple, toggle on and off. As an admin, if I'm setting this up, say I have Intra or Azure, whatever they're calling themselves this week. What is there like a how does that work with the onboarding? If I'm syncing, like I'm pulling everybody, like what does the setup process look like?
Right.
Not have to go for the full thing, but just kind of, yeah.
So okay, so maybe let me get into that right away. This actually has to do with this other application that I can use for that, which is basically this configuration application where I have connectors that I can use to set up my environment. Typically, it's sort of the primary provider that you would have in a company is either Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. This is a demo environment, so there's this Google test stuff, but that's like a Google Workspace connector, really. What's happening here, and the way it works is I've chosen some connector before, and there's different ways of setting this connector up. But basically, to answer your question, you would basically go ahead and prepare the connector. It's a matter of configuration. For those of you who've configured like a SAML type of configuration, that's really what it is. We're building on standards that are already there. There's nothing like specific about how Peig is configured from a authentication and provisioning point of view. It's all like standard-based SAML, OpenID Connect, or like like Microsoft has their great Graph API and other providers of other things. So that's one thing. Configuring the workspace from a technical point of view, it's usually a simple setup, a few parameters that are copied from like Entra to like the Peig workspace here. In my I can show you sort of like it's a few parameters that you sort of have to set, copy to here. On the other hand, there's a couple of parameters that need to be set up on Entra side. and then there's the migration phase, which there's different ways of doing that, but which I can't show you that unfortunately right now. But the way it typically works is you have users that are that download Peig, or device management if you have one on their existing devices, or help with that. And then what they do is they open Peig and they're asked to enter their own credential for the last time. So that would be like their username and password, or a multi-factor authentication request in addition. And by doing that, they would just basically migrate from Peig to the new method. So from the old method to Peig.
Okay, all right. You if you scroll down a little bit, I saw other. Are these more provided? These are other providers. Okay.
Yeah, these are other providers. Yeah, so there's a couple of there's a couple that I have like in this demo here. It's really like the list goes on and on. It's standard based. A lot of SaaS providers these days are really they're going forward to make sure they're standard based. It's a lot of it is SAML or OpenID Connect for a lot of applications for SMBs. Honestly, that's enough. You don't really need to do provisioning because it doesn't save you that much time and it doesn't really help otherwise, except for like Google and Microsoft 365, which is really good to sort of have some setup between Peig and which is, there's a detail to that we don't need to discuss today. But basically, like anything that is SAML based, the one application, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of, there's this website called the SSO Wall of Shame.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I have. Yeah.
Which I find hilarious. And I don't, again, not to name names, but HubSpot isn't doing great on that website. But there are, I think HubSpot is SAML as well. So, there's ways to configure HubSpot, and it's not hard. It's the same thing as any of the other providers. It's just a few parameters copied from one place to the other, and like timing it well, pretty much.
I like it. I just like dead simple. I mean, there's a part of me, I'm so used to getting in and tinkering with the smallest controls, getting very granular, but at the same time, I sort of like this, just kind of connect, get it done, get right to it. I really like this approach. It's that simple, and it won't scare the client either. Especially if can you allow a client to look at some of the management aspects, like if you needed to?
There's like you can allow them to participate in some form to manage. Let's say, I guess the pretty simple one is to like have what we call a manager role, to be able to allow, like, when new users come in, because there isn't really a technical aspect to this, they just need to be able to like approve a request, which usually is sort of like for SMBs, it's quite simple because they can do it contextually. They can just say, do I actually know, is this a request that seems to be real? Have I talked to this person? Are they supposed to onboard? Is this like, does this situation make sense? And they would get a request notification here, basically, that shows up in their Peig and in their email and everything. And they just sort of authorize their notification. And at that point, the access, the users, enrolled, they've got their rights, and they're just accessing stuff through Peig and securely, without sort of having to be bothered with the security aspect of access security again.
So if I connect to, say, like Azure, Google, would you pull in the users? I can see it, like if I'm adding a new user like NetSuite, would I see it, or do I need to specifically invite them, or you're syncing with?
So basically, there's like two ways. Like this, I guess this is about phases, right? The first phase is usually in the deployment, is also migration of existing users from Entra ID, right? Yeah. And that's really the situation I was telling you about before, where you basically the user opens Peig, they're asked to enter their their Microsoft 365, like their email address, really, their password, and that enrolls them into Peig. Basically, they use that for the last time, and then it's just, we basically switch the domain to a federated domain, and and
Oh, okay.
so basically that way you can easily onboard all your users without having to go through the tedious process of doing like one by one requests. This requesting is really there once you already have your uh, Peig set up and you're using it on a regular basis, and you have a new person coming into your company or a contractor or
Hmm.
whoever you want to give access to resources to. That's really when you would get the request to, because that's someone who hasn't been issued a credential before, and you don't want to go through the password if you don't have to. So
Okay. That's all right. Well, look. So we're kind of near the end of the hour. Got about a few
yeah,
minutes left, but this is great. I like your approach. It's just what you see is what you get, but it does a lot. It cuts out a lot of um, sort of like, whoa, what am I looking at? So I like that. Before we wrap it up, is there any last things you want to show or kind of leave for our viewers or
I guess what I would do, maybe one last little thing. I think
yeah.
this is an important aspect for MSPs. They have to manage a lot of customers, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
this is also extremely simple with Peig because um, we have this multi workspace environment set up. Like right now, I was in the company workspace. This is the demo company workspace. I can switch to or uh, my like our actual workspace like this. It's it's like not really very hard, and this actually makes the workflow very easy for
Oh, that's nice. I like
MSPs as well,
that.
right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
they don't really have a hard time working with you know tens of or hundreds of different workspaces at the same time, because it's quite an easy process for them. So I guess that's just maybe the last thing that I wanted to show. But I guess to as a last sort as to kind of wrap things up from my side, I mean this is a demo, of course, like it's a product demo, and I think what we're doing here is quite important from a access security point of view, and the way resources are protected and the way web access is protected in an environment where
Hmm.
uh, you have people that are accessing from different devices, from different places in the world, for different applications. But I guess what's really more important, I think, is I guess the key takeaway um, is to really think about the risk management side of things, and I guess for MSPs to look at, okay, what's actually happening today, and what are the threats out there that are there today, and which are the most important ones, which are really the threats to my clients, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, man. Um, yeah, browsers are definitely one of those things where you just you got to get those things locked down, and people they have their favorites, things like that. So this is really fascinating. I love what you guys are doing. Um, so I know everybody who is here on LinkedIn and in YouTube. We had a comment. I know we definitely had some viewers. But if you're interested, you want to connect with David and his team, feel free to reach out to him. Go to peg.io. Is that the website?
Yeah, it is absolutely.
And also, for those of you who are familiar with Channel Pro, you can go to channelpartner.com and search for PEG, and you can basically see reviews from verified MSP users who have used PEG. So check them out. And the other thing too here is if you want to connect with them on LinkedIn, YouTube, just drop a comment. They'll get in touch with you. But
Yeah.
this is cool. Again, I love seeing progress and this space evolve. No joke. You're probably the only one I've heard think about it, but I'm pretty sure you're the only one I've heard talk about quantum encryption. That Lumen threat
Mhm.
that's coming. So it's really interesting. In fact, I think yesterday China announced they successfully cracked RSA using quantum computer, but I don't know. People
You
are
never
kind of
know.
like, yeah. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
that
like
was
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Uh,
And I think
but
by the way, what's kind of like fascinating about this is with quantum resistant cryptography, it's also like, okay, well, like how do you actually know? Like it's quite it's going to take some time before theory proves to be actually um,
Oh yeah.
functionally viable.
Well, the world will soon know what harvest and decrypt later attack is going to be all about. So
Yep.
that's terrifying. So I don't think. But anyway, so thank you, David, for your time and showing this, and thank you everybody who's watching. And just reach out, and y'all have a wonderful upcoming weekend. And thank you for watching Demo Days. We're gonna wrap it up. Sound good?
Yep. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you.
See you.
See you later.
Hey, you're welcome, bro. Bye.
Bye.
See.